Hey there, welcome to HouseTalk. Today we're going to talk fiber cement siding. Home inspectors have been making erroneous callouts on fiber cement siding, and the guys from James Hardie Corporation reached out to us and they wanted to clear the air on some installation details. We're going to have a lot of fun today talking fiber cement siding. We got a couple great guests with us today. We're lucky to have Charlie Buell here from Charles Buell Inspections from the great state of Washington. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing well.
Nice. And we've got Troy Martsolf here. He is an install and technical manager for Hardie Plank, so James Hardie Corporation. So Troy knows something about fiber cement siding. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, Dylan. Good to be here.
Yeah. So Troy reached out to me. Troy and I taught a class together at the ASHI Fall Conference out here in Washington State. Probably a couple of years ago now, and he reached out to me because he was noticing that he was spending some time with a bunch of call-outs that home inspectors had made, and it seemed like there was sort of some confusion with their installation requirements, which, you know, really isn't surprising. We're into technical stuff, and they have different climate zones and things, so easy to get stuff messed up a bit. So anyway, Troy was nice enough to agree to meet with us today, and we put a little outline together of some common Hardie call-outs that maybe home inspectors are getting wrong. So our outline today, the first thing we'll talk about is inlay trim versus cap over. And we're going to talk about mixed up climate zones, pin backs, overdriven fasteners, and butt joint placement. So all great stuff. So let's see, we'll get going here. I'll get to my first slide, this overlay versus cap over. So Troy, why don't you tell us a little bit about, you said that Hardie's been working on kind of a new detail to address this issue of, you know, you can see in my first picture here, we have what I've always called the cap over detail, where the trim above like windows and doors is just literally sort of tacked on the top like a picture frame over the window, versus what I've always considered the real way to do it, where you lay the trim, you know, a thicker piece of trim into against the sheathing and flash it and so forth. So Troy, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of some new details you guys have been working on?
Okay, so I agree. You know, the traditionally trim has always been kind of a border from the cladding to whatever penetration or whatever stopping point you have. When it comes to butt to trim or inlay trim, it has traditionally been what's considered like the best practice, right? Best construction practice. So what we realized is that there's a fair amount of builders out there, contractors that are actually doing cap over trim with wood. And it goes against our best practice at Hardie, and actually it goes against flashing code to not have it flashed all the way back to the building over top of a window or a door. When it comes to any horizontal protrusion from the cladding, is supposed to be flashed back to the building. So we came up with a cap over, kind of a hybrid design of a cap over windows. And that's what we have here on this slide.
Yeah, so if you're listening, it's pretty cool. Hardie's come up with a header detail that essentially the header is like the way to do trim, where it's led into the siding and flashed against the sheathing, but then they're allowing the cap over detail on the other three sides of the window. Does that sound correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And the thing here is again, the upper portion of whatever penetration that you're trying to cap over needs to be flashed all the way back to the siding and not just laid on top of the siding.
Yep. Now, an interesting thing to point here for home inspectors is this is really related to Hardie trim. So let's say you do new construction and the builder does like this picture that we have underneath the outline here. What's Hardie's take on that installation? This is with wood trim.
Well, so Hardie's take on this would be, you know, we still don't necessarily, it is against flashing code because it's not flashed back to the building, and it's protruding from the siding. However, it's wood trim. So when you come to wood trim, you know, we're not going to weigh in on it, right? We're just going to weigh in on our products.
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense. And that gets a little bit to what your warranty is, right? The Hardie warranty is essentially that the board itself will last for however long the warranty is.
Correct.
So
Correct.
in theory, a building could completely rot out from the inside out, and as long as the siding is standing there,
Yeah.
Hardie's honored its warranty, right? I mean, that's
Exactly, exactly, and we try to stay within the bounds of what our manufacturing, or what our product scope is, um, but as we all know, there's interrelated things between flashing and trim and the siding.
yep. So I'm a home inspector. I'm doing a new build here, and if I see Hardie trim done in that older cap over detail, that's flat out wrong, right? They should be doing this detail like we see here today.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And I think the next slide that you have, or the one where it kind of shows all three sides, there it is pretty telling of how it goes, right? So the header piece again is really a true inlaid butt to application, and then
Hmm.
all the other three sides of this window are cap over, traditionally what you'd find with wood, and um, and so that would be the hybrid, right? We're doing an inlay header, and then the three sides are cap over.
Yep. Yeah. I suppose an advantage of that is on the edges, you then have a better ability for the siding or the building to expand and contract and not buckle the siding because you could have sort of more of a joint there.
Correct. I think what you run into on this is the window manufacturer will call for backer rod and a larger caulking bead between the siding and the window frame, because vinyl windows or fiberglass windows will move more than, say, if you had cladding or hardy trim or even wood trim there, probably.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Let's see. Let's go on to your next. So here you can see they've got kind of a mock-up. Now, did you guys test this at Hardie to know that this detail works?
Yeah, we absolutely did. We played around with a whole bunch of different options on the back piece of the shim, but what we found was is we could use an extra piece, basically what we call fall off, or a waste piece of Hardie as a shim behind the actual header piece, and then that creates that
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 thicker
butt to
trim.
application. Yeah, that thicker trim. Now it is also, I mean, from a manufacturing standpoint, this is our thinner product. This is our 4/4 product, and
Okay.
the butt to application or inlay application typically uses a 5/4 piece of trim.
So if you're an installer, you could choose this thinner product and double it up, or you could use the thicker product for the headers and the thinner product for the trimmers.
No, not really. You'd have to. So what we found was is the cap over 4/4, like the sides and the bottom, on
Hmm.
top of lap is around an inch and a quarter, or a little bit, fluctuates, right? But it's
Hmm.
it's right about an inch and a quarter thick, and 2/4, which is 3/4 to us, is an inch and a half. So you do have an offset on that header piece that sticks out a little bit farther
Hmm.
than the three sides, but. Yeah, we actually, um, if you wanted to do something else material up there, you'd probably use a 2x,
Hmm.
and we do have a Hardie 2x, but it is fluted, so you'd see holes in the side or something.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Dylan, do you have a way to take a drawing? I've drawn on top of this drawing. I want to ask him about a possible detail that might be added to this.
Yeah, here, let's see if we can let me see how to
Can we
do that.
switch screens or?
No, I can't show. So that's one where I would have needed it ahead of time probably, you know.
Yeah.
Um
Or
but
can I cut and copy and paste
well, can you email
somehow?
it to me?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, why don't you email it to me and then we'll hit that here in a little bit. So cool. Well, that's interesting. So this is now the detail we should be seeing, and I did include here, and we'll try to post a blog with this, but I do have the code for the flashing code that I think we're all on the same page that that detail doesn't really meet code. And this is a picture from a house that was built, I bet less than a year ago. So it is sort of interesting to me that builders are building trim details that don't really meet code. But
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that they actually pass the inspection for the permit.
yeah,
But
Yeah, yeah, that's just a bad detail.
it
It's a
really is.
water collection system.
It is. I mean, it's like you might as well put some fern things in there, so you fern seeds, so you get some ferns growing out of it. I mean, it's just a crazy detail. But anyway, I mean, that's what I'm, I've had a bunch of fights with builders over that in the last couple of years. So I'm really glad to see Hardie at least addressing it within the realm that you can, which is your own products. I kind of appreciate it's hard to pick fights about wood products and things that aren't yours.
Where'd they get that white flashing?
Yeah, on the lower part of the window. I don't know. This was one of the big builders. So, yeah, and we talked about this with the warranty, but the Hardie warranty is just for the product itself, so they don't care about the wood trim so much. Still might advise on what best practices are. There's another porch cap over detail.
I love the angles.
I know.
The way that
yeah,
the top board is just wow.
But at least it's angled to shed water, right?
that's true. That's true, Dylan.
Jeez, yeah, it's frustrating. Anyway, so Troy, tell me about Hardie has. I'd love to know about your climate zones, and I think you said that this wouldn't surprise me at all because it's happened to me before, where I'm trying to look stuff up with Hardie, and all of a sudden I realize, I'm in the Seattle market, I'm in the HC10 climate zone, and I have in the past looked things up and been like, oh man, I'm in the wrong climate zone. So tell me about how these started and how home inspectors should be a little careful about climate zones.
Yeah, so it actually is a good tie-in to the cap over conversation. So as an example, right? So what we have is we have two different zones. We have HC5 and HC10. HC5 is really if you wanted to kind of give it some bullet points of what it covers, like what kind of climate it covers, it's freeze and thaw cycles, and it's like heavy rains, and then seasons of high, dry, hot type of stuff, right? Yeah. So it typically is not I guess it's more for, like, Canada would probably be a prime example, right? So it's freeze and thaws a lot. There's when it rains, it comes in deluges, although Seattle gets that too. And then it also has kind of like this arid time frame, like in the winter or something like that. It would still be frozen, but it's going to be dry for a long period of time. And when it's hot, it's really hot, right? So it gets really cold and really hot. With HC10, it's mostly about just a wet climate in general. So it would be something like I guess what you call almost like a rainforest type of atmosphere. Yeah. So now we're in Washington, where you have that delineation, where we've delineated it is I believe it's 950 feet of elevation is HC5.
Interesting.
So basically like Snoqualmie, right? So you start getting into Snoqualmie, and it should be HC5. Now, we're kind of lenient on that and how it goes back and forth. In other words, someone at Snoqualmie Pass might be getting their lumber from Cle Elum, which would be HC5, or from Issaquah, which is HC10. So both of our products actually will survive in each one of those climates. It's just that some will perform better than others.
Yeah, and so the HC5 is actually manufactured differently.
Yeah, it is. It's manufactured differently. It also has the profile is a little bit different, so it has a drip edge on the bottom because, again, they get these deluge of water, so they don't like water just sitting there. So it actually has a drip edge on it, and then because of that, it has like a perforated line, not a perforated line, but like an embossed line on the top where you have to nail it. Yeah. And it is a different recipe as far as letting it freeze and thaw without delaminating.
Interesting. Yeah.
So sometimes we might see delaminated product. They use the wrong one in the wrong zone. Is that possible?
Yeah, highly unlikely. It would be more like, if it's at the end of its life cycle, it might start to do that. But to be honest, all of our stuff, when it says, it has a warranty on it for, let's say, 30 years for branded product. I mean, at Hardie, we like to over-engineer, so my guess is that the life of the product is actually more like 40 to 50.
Yeah.
And so really, no, we wouldn't see any delamination from the product. I'm just saying that it's just a better bondable product when we build it, because it has to go through that freeze and thaw cycle.
So if we're seeing delamination, it's more likely a different manufacturer then?
If you're seeing delamination, what you're probably seeing is the house is expanding and contracting, and it's pushing that butt joint or that product against something else, and then it's literally bending and buckling within the delamination, or there's a product defect. To be fair.
Yeah. And so with the, it would be a cool picture to get is just, I assume the only way that we can identify this as home inspectors would be the drip edge difference.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it would be the drip edge.
That'd be a sweet picture to get if we could get a picture of the two drip edges side by side.
I can get one. I can probably get one.
That would
I don't
be
know
awesome.
if I can get one like the same house.
No, it doesn't have to be the same house. Just like a cross section, so we can look at it would be really helpful. Because I don't know if I'd be able to. I might. I've seen so much of the HC10 that the drip edge might like catch my curiosity.
Well, is it a channel drip edge or just an angle?
It's an angle. The bottom of the board's angle. It's cut.
I gotcha.
Like a 10-degree angle or 12-degree.
I gotcha.
You probably would see it because it probably would have a different profile on the wall.
Oh, it would stand out at 10 degrees for sure.
Yeah. I think really the biggest thing in relation to like the cap over discussion we had, the biggest difference on HC5 and 10 is HC5 doesn't allow for cap over and HC10 does. So when I first started seeing like cap over kind of come onto my radar was when I would get a picture or a snippet from our best practice manual, and it would say, hey, it's not allowed to cap over Hardie trim or Hardie, and then that's HC5. So HC10 doesn't say to do it. It doesn't really say, and it doesn't say it's prohibited. So you run into kind of a gray area in HC10. We are trying to change that, though. We are updating our documentation.
So will this new detail be allowed in HC5, the one we just talked about?
It could possibly. It isn't right now. The biggest issue in cap over for HC5 would be, again, water gets back there, it freezes and thaws, and then it basically pushes the product right off the wall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. So cap over in HC10 is not necessarily encouraged, but it is allowed.
Correct. And like I said, I think with this new detail, it was never prohibited before, except for it doesn't meet code. It is now accepted, and not only is it accepted, we're kind of we're in some instances, like we talked about one builder here that does cap over, encouraging it because it's a better way to do it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Trying to raise the bar a little bit there. Yeah, and keep in mind, everybody, when we talk about this cap over again, this is Hardie trim. They're not weighing in on the wood trim. So HC5, if you see Hardie with a cap over wood trim detail, you're just whatever. That's you don't like it, but that's not your fight to pick.
But I'm a little confused as to whether Hardie trim is fine as a cap over, but wood isn't, or is.
To be fair, I mean, most of the builders that I've talked to that kind of put up a lot of product have not had any issues with cap over wood trim. Now they are very open and honest about the fact that wood won't last that long, especially in this environment. So, but from a envelope or building envelope standpoint, they really haven't seen any issues.
Yeah, I consider it sacrificial.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, it's a good language, Charlie. I mean, that's probably sort of how you have to pitch this is that it's, it's a higher maintenance way of doing a trim detail. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yeah, interesting. Cool stuff,
And
guys.
ideally, just get rid of the trim altogether. That's the best, right?
Well, that's what they do.
Yeah, there you go.
They do that on the other three sides, Charlie.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So, Dylan, did you get that email?
Well, it's tricky for me to pull out of this PowerPoint.
I got you.
I mean,
I got it.
it risks my technological ability. So let's get through this, and then I'll open that up. So cool. Pinbacks here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about pinbacks, because this is a common thing that comes up a lot. I for one, saw over the years. I mean, if you get a home inspection call and it's a 2004 build, my question isn't whether I'll find a cracked corner. It's sort of how many cracked corners I will find. And so I was always under the impression that the pin nails was a better sort of pin back detail at the butt joint than the full head nail. But you've got some good info on this, Troy. Why don't you tell us about
Yeah.
it?
So the pinbacks are a better detail on that. So the way Hardie reads, for example, pinbacks at butt joints is aesthetics only. So the only reason someone would pin it back, an installer, a builder, a contractor, would be for aesthetics. Like they see the wall is kind of, or that course at that butt joint, one panel or one plank is kind of popped up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's following the framing, right? It's not really an issue with the water envelope.
Mm-hmm.
But what we encourage is we encourage a finish nail, 16 to 18 gauge finish nail in there, or 15 to 18 gauge finish nail, like what you see here on this slide,
Okay.
to pin it back. And what we expect that to happen is that, and the reason why we like a finish nail is because as the house moves, expands, and contracts through the seasons, it will pull through the siding, and then it kind of almost moves back and forth in that siding until eventually it pulls through, and then it just kind of sits there. So that's what we prefer, because our product is dimensionally stable. It's not really going to move. It doesn't expand and contract like wood in the heat or in the cold. So it will stay fairly stable. And as the house moves, the wood behind it, it will push it forward and out. Now, Dylan, you brought up a good point with the headed nails from 2004. So our guidance used to be, yes, you can use a headed nail as long as it was off stud. And so what we said there is your minimum, you have to be off 3/4 of an inch from the side, from the end of the plank, and up an inch from the bottom. So you're not hitting a stud, basically. Yeah. Now, to your point, what ends up happening is the house still moves, and then depending on how much OSB or how much bite it has in the sheeting, whether it be plywood or OSB, it will grab enough to where that head puts enough pressure on the plank to where it breaks it. Mm-hmm. And that's really because the house is moving, not the plank. The plank's kind of staying where the studs are, but the sheathing behind it is moving pretty vastly. Yeah. in different seasons.
What do you think? What's your feeling about a nail with a head that's let's say 1/4 inch? I don't know what it is actually, but let's say a 1/4 inch head, and you drill an 1/8 inch hole first.
Pre-drilling the product.
Pre-drilling, it's not really going to help it much, because the head's gonna not want to pull through, and so it's just going to be.
What would be the forces that would make it want to pull through?
The house moving, and then the siding staying fairly, not moving at the same rate, right? So what we see is, we call a house basically breathes. It breathes in the season, so it goes from expansion sometimes in the heat, but typically actually it expands mostly when it's wet, like it's moist outside, and the water fills into the moisture, gets into the wood, and then it moves, right? So and then that moves everything, and then the siding typically stays fairly stable, and then it breaks, it cracks.
This is actually a pretty cool picture because you can almost see the siding just being, it's almost like, the nail and this
Yeah.
caulking all held together, and it's like the other side of the board got pulled away.
Yeah, that is actually a really good picture because if you look on the left side of that line, you can see where the head was imprinting
Yeah.
uh, onto the piece that's on the plank, and then the broken piece is where it stuck to.
Yeah.
That seems like an exceptional amount of movement, though, for as dimensionally stable as Hardie is.
Well, Hardie's not moving; it's the building moving, right? It's the
Yep.
OSB and the wood framing and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we expect that our product in a 12-foot board will move less than an eighth inch for the entire board of a 12.
Well,
And that's still quite a bit, but that's not in this picture, that's 3/4 of an inch. So it's an eighth of an inch and 3/4 of an inch right there.
Hmm. Interesting. Cool. Well, pinbacks. So to summarize pinbacks, I think, yeah, just basically this detail's okay. You can have a full head nail as long as it's not into the stud, which was, at least 3/4 of an inch off the butt joint. So you can have a full head for a pinback, but the little pins are also an appropriate pinback, almost a preferred pinback, where butt joints might be flaring a little bit. Does that sound accurate?
That is absolutely accurate.
Cool. Let's see. We'll keep moving here. Overdriven fasteners. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this, Troy?
So overdriven fasteners. So we expect that there will be a fair amount of these in a job. However, we have we don't want to see anything overdriven. Flush means that the nail head is either snug on the top of the board, or it is just sunken into a board enough to where the head is even with the front plane of the plank, if you will.
I brought this picture up. That's probably a pretty well-driven fastener, huh?
That's pretty well driven. That's pretty well driven. Now, what our product is not structural. At least our 5/16 product is not, which is what most of what you see here. So our 5/16 is not structural. So what happens is if you overdrive it, it doesn't have enough substance there to hold that, and so literally it'll just pull through, and the entire plank will kind of come through, and so it's lost basically its fastening power.
This is really important. If you're a home inspector, you're inspecting a fiber cement installation. I always try to pull on a bunch of the boards to see if they're loose. And then when they are loose, I often find, and I couldn't find a good picture at the moment, but you'll see a fastener that looks like the one that's up here where it's gone through the material, but a blind fastener, it's up under things. And is there a correlation then of overdriving those fasteners to having loose siding?
Correct. Yeah, we consider anything that's overdriven is not really even fastened. So once it's overdriven, you pretty much mark that one off as not being fastened.
Yeah.
So and I do the same thing when I'm checking a house. I'm always pulling on the siding to pull out on it and see if it's flapping up. If it's flapping up, excessively, it usually either means it's high nailed or it's overdriven.
Okay. Charlie, I don't know how what your experience is, but I've found that when it's really installed well, I can hardly really check the fastening. It's so tight, you can't hardly see it.
You mean on the corners, or?
Well, just in general, I mean, you can usually find places, but if a well-installed installation, I feel like a lot of it, I can't pull it high enough to check the fasteners because it's pretty tight. You can still find a few spots at like butt joints or something, but that it's, I'm really searching to find a place to even see the fastening. Whereas when they're really overdriven, I mean, the siding often has felt like it's just falling off the house. It's pretty loose.
You need a bigger claw hammer, Dylan.
Yeah, that pry bar that I left in the car. So that's a cool
there's
picture.
an overdriven one right there. That's a great picture.
But it's also too low, right?
That's right. So it's
or the sign doesn't lap enough, one of the two.
Yeah, so it's exposed. So overdriven and exposed. So there you'd try to check underneath, look and see if you can see another fastener nearby, because that one doesn't even count, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is, so when I look at something like this, I actually don't worry about something that we call those shiners. we don't really worry about shiners so much because I mean I worry more that it's overdriven, not that I can see it. Because I know that anything that's face nailed, let's say, not blind nailed, if you were to face nail our product, you actually get 20 miles an hour more holding power on average than a blind nail application. So it actually helps hold it, but as long as it's not overdriven.
Hey Troy, I got a funny story for you. This was in New England, so it's going to be zone.
Okay.
Five. Is it zone five? Five, I think. Yeah. And my nephew, he got permission from Hardie to face nail everything.
Oh.
Well, so
because they wanted it to look like the old look where everything was
sure,
nailed.
trying to knock off the lap siding. Yeah. That's cool. And was it blind nailed also, or just face nailed?
No, just face nailed.
Yeah. So that would be an issue, correct? If you were to find it, blind nailed and they did such a bad job and then went through and face nailed it, that would be incorrect.
We have a technical bulletin that actually addresses that. That is a fix, but in moderation. So as a general rule, we don't allow, I shouldn't say don't allow, but we discourage blind nailing and face nailing in the same board. Again, because you're putting that board under so much pressure, you could snap that plank. I have a correction to make from earlier. I said that it was 1/8 inch movement in a 12-foot board. It's actually a 16th inch movement in a 12-foot board. So, but yeah, I mean, face nailing actually is used in high wind areas. Some of the Midwest, Southeast, where you get hurricanes, they'll face nail.
Yeah. What do you think about like 6-inch siding with a 4-inch 4-inch exposure as a way to restrain it more?
Yeah, anytime you're going to use a smaller piece of siding, for sure, is going to give you certainly more holding power, just because you're not as far away from the fastening point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. So Charlie, you're suggesting a detail for like a high wind zone would just be not do so much of a reveal.
Yeah. In that same project where I said when they face nailed, they used I think a 2.5-inch reveal was 6-inch product. So it was like it's almost doubled everywhere.
Boy, that's a lot of cement. Yeah, that's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Cool. That's neat. Yeah, I mean, New England, you get hurricanes and stuff, so that's the real deal there.
Well, they were more after the look than anything. They wanted that.
Clabbered.
Yeah,
the old clabbered look. Yeah.
The interesting thing is that in a real clabbered look, it's all painted out. You don't see the nails anyway. But
that's right.
Kind of funny.
Yeah. No, you never see them. And we used to like spackle them and then sand them if they would show up, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk. We'll hit our final thing here, and then we get to Charlie's email real quick. But so butt joint placement, Troy. Why don't you? I think you gave me some nice little diagrams here. But what I heard from you is that people are calling out as incorrect the fact that the siding installer put a butt joint above a window or door opening. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, I mean, I've run into actually quite a few lately where that I get called out and say, okay, well, my product's not warranted because the butt joints placement was right above the window, right on the corners, and they said, well, that's against your best practice. Well, it's against our recommendations, but it's not a requirement. So, and this diagram is a prime example. You'll see, because a lot of these homes are production build homes, you'll see that some guys are out there doing, they don't want to notch the product basically. So what they do is they cut everything as a full end of the board. They run it right up against the trim, and then they cut a little sliver on the top to cover the top, just the top of the window, and they make a joint on each side of the corner of the window. Yeah. The reason why that's not recommended is because that's the corner of the window, or the penetration point, is usually where you're going to get the water intrusion. So now the rot usually starts at the bottom of the window where it finally starts to puddle, but Most of it happens at the top where
Interesting.
the water is kind of running down a wall and hitting that. So it's not against our requirement, but it is not recommended.
Yeah, yeah,
Just poor
cool.
building practice.
Yeah, and you sent me one other good slide. So a preferable would be that you notch each corner and then have a butt joint in the middle somewhere.
Correct. Our recommendation really on this is 3 to 6 inches off of a corner of a penetration. So, I mean, this is ideal, right? If you have one right over the top, or if you notch it, use a full piece and just notch it and then just slide it over the top, right?
Yeah. It would have
But with proper flashing details, it really shouldn't matter much, should it?
It really shouldn't. It really shouldn't. But again,
Whoops.
we can't verify the flashing has been
Right.
done,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and good data. I mean, I think what I hear from Troy is he's getting phone calls about this, that home inspectors are calling this stuff out. So we're just trying to clear the air here that this is
Yeah,
maybe not the best detail, but it is allowed, and it's allowed in both climate zones. Am I correct?
correct. Yeah, yeah, and actually that's a good point, Dylan. So really, from a building, a home inspector point of view, it's something to call out for your homeowner because it is something that they have to watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, it's not a requirement for Hardie. So it would just be, hey, this is probably not the best building practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I in my own experience in my templates and library and stuff that I use, I have a bunch of sort of nuanced language of things that aren't really installed the way we recommend doing it today. And some of them I'm kind of jumping up and down and saying this is really a problem. And others I sort of point out that there's better ways to do it, but it's probably not worth fixing other than monitoring it. And maybe you keep things up with caulking and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, Not ideal, but it's tough as inspectors. We can't re-engineer the house.
No, exactly.
so,
Exactly.
so I am now going to take the risky technological leap of trying to escape out of.
Just right click and open it in a new tab.
Let's see.
Yeah.
We get to see your password now. No.
I know. Yeah, that's right. Is this what you did, Charlie?
Yeah.
Okay,
It looks
cool.
like.
So
So I just
Oh.
wanted to, yeah, I'd like to see well, obviously you have that 1/4 inch gap over the window on the left, but maybe that shim should step up so that any siding could go up behind the outer
Yeah, so
board.
I got you. Now I understand what you're saying. Yeah, actually, so funny thing is that we don't really even require the only reason the shim is there is to allow I guess production installers to move quicker, right?
So
So
it could just be little slats or something.
correct. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
That does it. Like again, we assume that it's going to be fall off, and the reason why we kind of say Hardie trim or other is because from a production build standpoint, if a guy is trying to, these guys are all piece rates, by the way, the installers, so they're trying to go as fast as they can, but meet the quality that they're supposed to. So what you run into is we wanted to make it as easy as possible for someone who is installing, on a piece rate system.
That'd be a good place for whitewood.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there, see, that's the whole idea is we're assuming that hopefully there's no whitewood to put back there. So at some point they're just using Hardie trim, but that's wishful thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
But
Well,
you see, what my point is, you've got a drawing way back where it shows the head trim going way past the vertical side trim, and I thought that if it had that overlapping gap, the siding essentially would be lapped by the front trim board.
Yeah, I get it.
Cool, guys.
like
Well,
that.
a great conversation. I appreciate everybody taking the time. Hopefully, this clears the air on a handful of call outs that home inspectors are commonly making that may not be, that the siding may actually indeed be installed correctly. And hopefully, we all learned a little bit of stuff about fiber cement siding. And a big thanks to our sponsors for this program. We got the James Hardie Corporation, makers of great building products for your house. We have Dylan Chalk HouseTalk, the host of this podcast. We've got Dylan Chalk, the author of The Confident House Hunter, a fantastic resource for helping home buyers and realtors get out in front of the home inspection. And we've got Scribeware Software. Thanks, Scribeware, for making the best home inspection report software in the industry. Have a great day. Bye.